It is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That is Shock Paris with something brand new. Those Eyes. It's only 10 years old now.
Brand new, 10 years old. New release from Shock Paris.
Yeah, there's a new one.
And in about 5 more years, we'll get that next single.
Nice. Well, this is Neeley along with my good friend Chris Aiken. We are here at the 78th Street Studio in Cleveland, Ohio for the Raining Rock event. And this quiet guy sitting across from us. Hi. He's just sitting there like, what are these guys talking about?
It's like, who are these fucking assholes?
Give me something to play off, and I'll go all night. I got a big mouth.
And we want to welcome to the mic Tony. You say Erba?
Erba.
Is that how you say it?
Correct.
All right. Well, Tony, you've been around a long time doing a lot of different things. And obviously, are you originally from Cleveland?
First of all, let me say it's nice to be on your show. And I've never actually met Chris, but that's a name I've heard forever and ever. So, but anywho.
Now, are you sorry?
No, not at all.
Not yet.
I don't know. Do you owe me money? I guess so. I mean, I wasn't born here. Bounced around. Lived in Berlin when I was a little kid, Kansas, but my family is from the east side of Cleveland, so I ended up here.
So you come out to to this event today because obviously you've been extremely involved with a lot of different music projects, bands, whatnot, and so tell us a little bit about yourself to get our fans familiar with who you are and what you do and all that good stuff.
Well, I'm 5'6". I'm a cancer. I like soaping stamps, long walks on the beach, and gas station hot dogs. Any other questions? No, I basically just a Parma guy, born of middle-class parents, got into weirdo rock music. I wasn't much of an athlete in high school. I know it's hard to believe now, but I wasn't what you'd call a looker, so I didn't have much success with chicks or the cognoscenti in high school. So naturally, I drifted into weird rock and roll, which made life even more difficult for me. So then I was into. I found this book in the library called The Book of Rock, and it had all these. It was an English book, so it had a lot of photo features on bands like Status Quo and Thin Lizzy and stuff, and I really was like pretty enthralled because those bands looked much cooler than Bruce Springsteen or whatever. They had big stacks of amps and sweaty and denim and leather and that kind of thing. So I got really into that, but I was never proficient enough, and I knew I would never be to be like a shredder in a Thin Lizzy type of band. So punk rock and hardcore seemed much more attainable, immediate, and also I had a lot of angst within me, so I could lash out and have people pay to see me do it. So I got into hardcore and punk bands, and my first band was a band called Lek in 1985 or 86 in high school, and the drummer was my best friend and a pretty large figure in Cleveland metal and worldwide metal, and that was Jim Kanya. Who was in Nunslaughter and a million other bands. But so that was our first little band, and from there I went on to a million other bands. Face Value was a fairly big band with our little micro genre, and subsequent bands, Nine Shocks Tear and Gordon Sully, Motherfuckers, and Fuck You Pay Me. And I'm sorry if I can't swear on the radio.
Swear?
Okay.
No, swear.
So, but basically hardcore and kind of boogie rock have been my stock and trade for about 33 years or so.
Sure. So what are you currently doing now? Are you, do you got a project or a band you're currently with?
I'm just a fan now. Our band broke up, not of my desire or volition in this March, and it sucks because that band was FYPM, Fuck You Pay Me, and we had. For being weekend warriors and part-timers, we were a fairly big band. We did a lot of big tours, Sheer Terror, I Hate God, and et cetera, et cetera. And the bass player just decided to hold up the band for money on the eve of a big tour with the Cro-Mags, and we just broke up. The drummer was like, I don't want to get another asshole that's just probably going to do the same thing. I'm just tired, So, right. And we're all over 50, so it's a little hard. That's a very athletic, physical form of music, and although we have a name and a bit of a cachet in the scene, you're still in a beat-up van playing, the grog shops of the world. which I happen to love, but it ain't easy, you know.
Right, and that's so true, especially in that genre. I mean, unless you're Hatebreed, I guess, which is not really that genre anymore.
Right.
You know, I mean, even the legends, Agnostic Front and whatever, if they want to tour, they're doing the same thing. They're getting a bigger van maybe, but they're still just in a van the same as everybody else.
You nailed it. They have a bit better choice of venue. They have more creature comforts, and they have a wall of merch, that's how they're able to do that.
Right.
We don't have a wall of merch. We have a smaller, shittier van, and we have to be at work on Monday, and that's
Right.
always the bugaboo in doing the whole thing. Nine Shocks came very close to a point where we were like, I mean, I've always had a job. I've never been like the other guys in my band kind of were able to get away with the couch surfing thing or working like as dishwashers or this kind of menial jobs that you have when you're in a band, but I was never comfortable doing that. For me, I just always had a regular gig. I don't have any fallback. My mom was like, get the fuck out when I was 17. So there's no like, well, Mom, you know, man, I need to move back in the basement. So I always just had to be an adult before I really wanted to. This kind of thing allowed me to not be so much of an adult, but there was always that nagging where I my dad's voice was always in my head, like, Anthony, do you have hospitalization? Anthony, don't quit your job, you know. So we came to the point with Nine Shocks where maybe I'm going to quit all that. We'll get a big house, live together, and we had an offer to sign with this record label called Relapse, which would have meant like we're going to have to go out and work these records, like
Right.
tour, like fucking our friends Municipal Waste, like those guys on the road 6-7 months out of the year, which I was into at that point, but it's like, this is the time. It's never going to happen again. Either do or die. And ultimately, we're a little long in the tooth to do that now.
Right,
You know?
and the interesting thing with Muni Waste is the fact that they're more of a thrash thing than a hardcore thing. There's quite the resurgence of that right now because
Yeah.
they're still big. You know, obviously Metallica is still called that, even though they're not doing that. But, you know, and Anthrax and whatnot, there's still a big enough name bands to make that next level, them, Havoc, whatever, you know, get better accommodations.
Totally. And that was a good music that they kind of sparked that resurgence.
Right.
And now look at what Power Trip's doing. They're taking
Yeah.
that to the next level. So, but yeah, we were not like that. And there might have been, who knows, if, say we did sign to a bigger label, maybe the label would have dropped hints like, maybe you should get on the train with this
Right.
thrash revival. And I'm just an obstinate son of a bitch, and I probably would have been like, now
Right.
we're going to make the most primitive sounding record just because I'm stubborn, you know?
Right, and obviously, yeah, Relapse would have you working, but Relapse isn't exactly known for breaking anybody out either. I mean, what's the biggest thing that's ever come out of there? Candiria? Dillinger Escape Plan, maybe?
You would know better than me, but also at that time, we were talking about, this is probably like 2005.
Okay.
So it's probably had more cachet then. This is just it's harder and harder and harder for bands. They have to do these package tours. Basically, a band now on that kind of level is you're a T-shirt company that plays music
Right.
to sell the T-shirts.
Right,
You know?
no, you're right.
And I hate to be so cynical, but that's what it is.
I mean, that is true. I mean,
is.
we talk to we do a lot of interviews and whatnot, and we ask the question. It's just like, how do because everybody, well, we're going to get a new CD and we're going to make new music and we're going to do this. It's like, what's the point? It's like you know, unless you're a touring band or you're just doing it for the passion of doing it. What are you going to get out of it? What's your long game here? And it's just like, well, and it's like, it isn't 1980s anymore. It's not that way anymore.
Unfortunately, music is a cruel mistress. You're deep in it. You know this ain't good for you. It's the law of diminishing returns as each year clicks off the calendar. But you're in. Just as I thought I was out, they pulled me back in type of situation. But yeah, I mean, for instance, I just did this interview, and they were asking about the nuts and bolts of like being in music. I was thinking like this band I was in, like, face value. So I think we sold like 15,000 copies of the first full length, Price of Maturity, which that's a good amount of records for a hardcore band that's not like DRI or 7 Seconds or
Right.
your classic starter bands that are in every record store across America. That's a good.
Sure.
And All Rotten from Pittsburgh, they sold like 30,000 copies of their 7-inch. But that is like, back then that was like, oh, that's pretty good. Those bands are doing pretty good. But now we'd be like, oh my God, that's like, they're like fucking Lady Gaga. No one sells records anymore, you know?
Right.
They just don't, and it sucks.
No, you're so right, man. I'm curious as a hardcore fan, because I don't ever get to talk hardcore with anybody. What do you think of Cro-Mags without Paris Mayhew?
The Cro-Mags are...
Can that be really Cro-Mags?
They're the Bro-Mags. The Cro-Mags are an interesting proposition. They're a reality show come to life. I mean, each guy hates each guy. You're talking about a band where the bass player tried to stab the singer backstage. You're talking about a band where the bass player hired someone to break into John Joseph's apartment and try to inject him with AIDS. I mean, it doesn't get any better. But it's a nostalgia thing. They come to town. They play Age of Quarrel. People go fucking ape shit.
Right.
But if you're asking, like, the legitimacy of it, I mean, I saw them at the Bohemia in Tremont, which was one of the scariest show I ever saw, and that band was a motherfucker. They were terrifying. And Paris Mitchell Mayhew, well, if you read John Joseph and Harley's books, he's like, sounds like the most cancerous man alive. He made the sound, you know.
Yeah.
He was essential to that first record, you know.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about that, man. It's just weird that, you know, for me anyway, I'm not old enough to remember all of that stuff, but I'm old enough to remember a good amount of it, and it is just so weird seeing those bands. It was so much about heart and soul and real.
And energy and street-level appeal, you know.
And that's almost why they all died away, because they all had such energy and such purity and such venom that they all just kind of disintegrated under the weight of it.
The weight of their own bullshit.
Yeah.
It's a hard lifestyle to live. I love all that hard. You know, I was one of these guys that got into hardcore because it spoke to me. It was accessible. I could do it. I had something to say. I wanted to do lyrics that weren't about your typical heavy metal lyrics. But I came from before that, I came from the new wave of British heavy metal scene. I mean, I was at Shattered every weekend, Warped every weekend, going to Diversions and Shadows and the Pop Shop and seeing all those shows. The Variety, I must have seen 50 shows at the Variety.
Right.
And I was never one of these guys that got into hardcore and said, I'm a punk now, and I renounce heavy metal, you know.
Right.
I may have cut my hair, but it's like I never stopped going to see fucking Raven, you know.
Right, exactly, man. Well, dude, it's got to be, as you look back at your own life, and I mean, Joe gave us the cheat sheet of 1,500 to 1,700 shows that you've played. I mean, you've probably seen every change under the sun. What do you think of it now versus back in the day? And when was it at the best? Not the best for crowds and the best for the musicians themselves.
I would have to say probably, I would say around 86 to 90, even though hardcore kind of like the first wave had broken up or went metal, and that whole crossover thing, which I never really necessarily loved, but it got big. We started getting attention. Mm-hmm. You know, MTV would do a special on like Slayer playing with the Crumbsuckers and DRI.
Right,
you know,
right.
like, so that was like kind of to me the glory era, because for a moment it looked like we were kicking the door open. Mm-hmm. We were taking over. You have to pay attention to this style of music. The dirtbags, the white trashers are like fucking like making a statement
right.
that this is valid. This is a genuine youth movement and it matters. And fuck you if you don't like it. You're just going to have to deal with it.
Right.
I happen to really have loved that era. Bands were selling records. Every now and then you might even get paid for a gig, you know. I mean, we play these big shows at the Agora Face Value at the Larry Collins shows, and it's like, you know he was going to give you $50, and there's like the place is sold out, but it's like it's still awesome, you know.
Right.
And then eventually we could headline, and then Larry is out of the fucking equation, you know.
Right.
But I would think that that's when bands were drawing the most. The big four thrash bands were around. Your DRIs and COCs were around, and you know, it sucks that Minor Threats and you know, the Minor Threats of the world didn't get to that point. But you know, Henry Ford never got, you know, the Model T didn't get to the fucking place where the fucking Ferrari did either. Right, you know what I mean?
Well, Tony, since your band disbanded back in March, do you have any desire to put together some kind of a new project, or still get out there and perform or sing, or are you just kind of chilling now, or what are you doing?
I don't know. I mean, I miss it a lot because it's since I'm 17, I've been doing the same thing. I'm 51. All my friends, I've met everyone. My whole social strata is through this, and I still love the music. I love classic metal. I love hardcore. I love guitar-oriented, non-commercial music. I love it. I cannot get away from it. As to being in another band, I don't think I'm going to start a new band because I cannot. I've never been a guy that does a band that's like, yeah, we play every couple months. It's just it's bowling night for me and the fellas. I can't do it. I just have a competitive streak where I want to take over and I want to book. Like before you know it, I'll be booking Buffalo and Rochester and Detroit and doing our typical loop. So I can't do it unless I'm doing it to the point where I'm about to lose my job. Right. So I think we'll just do reunions. I had a boogie rock band called Amps to 11 that got pretty popular, and we do reunions every now and again. We did the last one we played was in Canton in May, and that was a packed affair. And then we did something last November at the Winchester, and that was packed. So that's fun. People still want to see the band. People come to the shows, and we have to practice twice, and very little work for a lot of reward, both. I don't want to say monetarily, but more like seeing your old friends and having fun and sweating and cranking up the amps,
Amps to 11.
Amps to 11 is one. I loved you. I loved amps.
Well, thank you. You're too kind. I don't know. Maybe just reunions. Maybe nine shocks. We're 4 with sellouts. So it's all up to the singer. He owns Housefrau Records. Everyone should patronize Housefrau. But when he feels like doing a reunion, he texts me and says, "Hey, you good for New York City on this date?" And I'm like, fucking A,
Hell yeah.
That's where I'm at now,
All right, well, cool. At least you got enough, in your back catalog to have some fallback to be able to still go out there and perform live and,
bilk the peasants.
Yeah, well, or to use an old Rolling Stones reference, get your yayas out.
Right.
So you get that out, get out of the system for a little bit, and then, wait for the next one to come along.
Yeah, it used to be Back in Black. Now it's, my aching back.
Well, Tony, we appreciate you stopping out here to talk to us. Are you on any kind of social media or got any websites or anything people can check out?
There's all kinds of stuff on the internet. I was never the best I'm a great self-promoter, but I would always do it through my personal Facebook page, just Tony Erba on Facebook. I will, I'll give one, if I may, be a talk slut here for a second. I will be DJing next Friday night, November 1st at Porco, the best bar in Cleveland, Tiki Bar Porco on 25th, and I'll be playing new wave of British heavy metal, boogie rock, proto-punk, 77 punk, and anything that sounds heavy is non-commercial, and it'll get you up and dancing. So come down to Porco next Friday. That's all I got.
All right, perfect. Nice. Well, I thought maybe we'd end this interview with some Fuck You, Pay Me with some Dumbed Down. So what can you tell us about this?
That was the title of our last and best record. We put out 3 full lengths and a couple singles and compilations, and the whole how the French say oeuvre for that record was I want to strip it down to almost no solos, just catchy, as simple as it can get, because I saw society, as we get more and more technological with social media and stuff like that, we think we're smarter, but we're actually dumber. People are not socialized well. People do not play with each other. They can't even have a cohesive debate. It's just like, fuck you, you're canceled, you're an asshole. So I feel society is getting dumbed down. So I wrote that song, and the whole record was like, the songs are going to be very simple, very stripped down, very catchy. And also, while I loved hardcore and stuff, I always knew that this was, it's absurd. Punk rock is absurd. Music is kind of absurd. And while I participated in it lovingly, I always was kind of laughing, not only at it, but at myself, I took not being serious very seriously, if that makes any sense.
All right. Well, we want to say thanks to Tony for, sitting in with us for a few minutes and giving us his unbridled thoughts and opinions on things. So we're going to wrap up this little interview here with some Fuck You, Pay Me with some Dumbed Down. So here it is. It's FYPM exclusively here
on your classic metal show.
Thanks, guys.